Like I mentioned at the start of the show, lighter week for us. Only the one race of the series that we usually cover here. So, Brandon, since you're usually unable to join us for the weekend wrap-up shows, I want to give you the opportunity to react to the Cup Series race, and certainly a lot of people talking about the tire fall off and the quality of the racing that we saw, including probably a longer green flag run than any of us anticipated, all the way up to the checkered flag. So, the first question, just very simple: did you enjoy the race? Would you have voted yes on the Jeff Gluck poll?
Well, before I can answer that, I this time around the Cup race, I saw a good majority of it, not from beginning to finish, as is custom most weekends, but from what I did see and from the reaction from fans, really glad that this was taken so well by the Gluck poll. That's a really good sign. And also, I think it has something to do with painting that wall. I was so excited when I saw them getting rid of the black. It's aged, it's been there long enough. The last great Coliseum. It can still be the last great Coliseum, but it just the aesthetic of the place. It needed to get back to something else, and they brought back the white and red. It was wonderful. It looked great. Do I think it affected the racing? Maybe a little bit, but only because it may have helped them with their breaking points or something like that. But looking at the race itself, the tire fall off was amazing. Goodyear did not see what was coming, I guess, and we got a lot of cheese on the outer grooves for a lot of the media folks to pick up and bring home. It kind of reminded me of, I mean, it wasn't a tire heavy race, but 2019 with the Indy Grand Prix, I was able to pick up some rubber from there when the year that Simon Pagenaud swept everything. But yeah, to see all the lead, I mean, breaking records at Bristol, that's got to tell you something about how this race went. Of the lead changes there, we just don't see that kind of action there, where they stay so close together. Usually, we've got a guy or two getting a good 4 or 5 second gap between first and second and third, and then you got the rest of them and lapping cars and things like that. But there was just a lot of degradation with the tire, and that was affecting the race in an oddly satisfying good way, which I know Goodyear is probably scrambling right now, but the race fans are happy, and Bristol's probably going to want to get something like this at the night race if they're smart, and I know they are. So expect something like this probably in the fall, but Goodyear will probably bring something else to the table as well.
Yeah, when we talked about this on the wrap-up show yesterday as well, I would be a little surprised if Goodyear doesn't, at least look at the data and, maybe do a little bit of testing, to see if there's anything they should tweak when we come back for the fall race. But of course, this was the same tire that they used in the night race as well. So, who knows exactly what caused, what we saw on I say on Sunday yesterday, in the Cup race. I mean, I'm certainly no scientist. I couldn't tell you what the difference was, but whatever it was, it certainly put on one heck of a show. And it wasn't just the tires as well, like you mentioned, Brandon. Just watching the drivers, who could manage it better than others, and those that decided to push at different points in the race, leading to all those lead changes that we saw. I mean, a record number there as well. I thought it was a fantastic race, and I think certainly in the moment yesterday it was almost unanimous. I gotta say, it really speaks to, I suppose, and I hesitate to use this word because I know some people, haven't been so happy when others have used it, but I do think we've been spoiled this year in many respects with the quality of the racing that we've seen on the Cup side of things, and to be disappointed in a race that, or in a poll that's getting only 88%, yes, and was it a good race? I think, speaks to maybe the expectations that we have for how people are going to react to what we saw yesterday. But I mean, again, I'll just say what I said on the wrap-up show yesterday as well. If you didn't like that race, I've got a feeling either you're a Denny Hamlin hater, or you just have very unrealistic expectations, or you and I guess, are just diametrically opposed to what we enjoy seeing in racing. There was a caller on Dave Moody's show this afternoon, actually, that was basically saying the only thing that could have saved the race in his mind was a late race caution with 25 to go so that they could all put on fresh tires and then race hard to the finish. I can't tell you how hard I was praying for it to go green all the way to the finish yesterday because I did not
Right. It
want
was
to late
gonna
race.
ruin it.
Yeah, I'm with you. You put it perfectly, Brandon. It was going to ruin what was, a fascinating green flag run to say. I mean, again, the fact that the pit window was cut in half by how long the tires were lasting as opposed to the fuel run. I mean, this is something, and our friend Alex brought this up yesterday as well. Um, how often do you think Ty Gibbs has had to conserve tires in his NASCAR career so far? I mean, it's been a long time. It's a completely different skill set. And again, I think it was no coincidence that Denny Hamlin won the race, Martin Truex Jr. was second, Brad Keselowski was third, because those are three of the most experienced guys in the field that were racing back when that was a much more common thing that these drivers had to learn how to do and manage well, and experience ultimately won out in the end.
Yeah, like think of like a miniature Homestead Miami, and it's the championship. You had whoever could conserve their tires the better, the best out of the championship four was probably going to be in front. And it kind of felt like that. Only they weren't riding the top because they had the resin on the bottom, and all the tire debris was on the top. And so by the end of the race, everyone was flat avoiding it. Yeah, it was just really really odd. And I like how Mike Joyce said that they were experimenting because they really were. Because I
Yeah.
don't think they really expected that to happen either, especially from qualifying. It didn't really give you any sense of what was to come. And Ty Gibbs sweeping both stages. You mentioned it. When in his career has he had much to do with conserving tires? It's good to see that for a sophomore driver. And Kevin Harvick noted it because he's got ownership stake in it. Felt a lot like his Max Cars Tour race, and I wholeheartedly
Yeah.
agree. That's not a bad thing. That's a huge compliment. It's good to see that kind of racing at Bristol.
Yeah, well, and I brought this up yesterday as well. Josh Berry, I know he fell back a little bit towards the end, but there was one point where those three experienced guys were top three, and then Josh Berry was right there in fourth. And Berry had a great qualifying run as well. I don't think it's any coincidence that he, with his experience, I know he's a Cup Series rookie, but as a racer, he's been around for a long time in late model races. How many short tracks has he run where he's had to know how to manage his tires? I don't think it was any coincidence at all that he was up there as well.
That's his bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And fantastic product that we saw. And I just want to, before we move on here, also applaud NASCAR for not deciding, hey, we've got too much rubber on the track. We need to throw a caution to, get the sweepers out there. Or, hey, the tires seem to be doing really strange things and wearing out a lot quicker than we expected. Let's throw a competition caution so that everybody can get caught back up. I'm so happy that they let that play out naturally. And again, even as some cars were, losing tires and tires were going flat and they were slowing on the racetrack, they were able to get down to the apron and into the pits without causing a yellow. They seemed very, very hesitant to actually put their hand on the caution button, and they ultimately ended up not needing to. And again, to have a race where you only had 5 cars on the lead lap at the end of it, and yet also had all these different lead changes. And, it just, again, I don't know what more you could want from what felt like one of the most old school NASCAR races we've seen in a very long time. So I was thoroughly entertained, and I thought it was a fantastic race.
Yeah, and not entertained in the sense of, oh boy, cars are passing, I'm happy. No, it felt like a race,
Yeah.
and it felt like everyone still had a legitimate chance, and it wasn't just some invisible force that was keeping them from being able to pass each other. It felt like just real competition where they all had an opportunity to make their way to the front.
Yeah, and again, to your point, Brand, it's not like the overtakes were because everybody was in this super tight, close pack like a super speedway, or somebody had DRS on a straightaway, so they get a power boost or a miles per hour boost or whatever, push to pass. This felt like a natural, organic race that played out over what, by Bristol standards, is an incredibly long green flag run where experience won out in the end, and that was great to see.
And also, the guy that got nearly clipped up in the wall earlier in the race ends up winning it. You got to love those even
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, to bounce off of that, I think some people have said, Goodyear maybe made a mistake. Was this mistake maybe the greatest mistake ever, or the biggest blessing in disguise, a happy accident, whatever you want to call it?
I hope they learned something from their accident. I hope they don't think of it as a mistake when they see the overwhelming positive response. Maybe NASCAR will be all right. Just let them cook. Let them think about that for the fall. And it's not a complete disaster. take a look at the TV ratings. Let's see what happens. And also, I'd like to see the attendance change, if any, for the Bass Pro Shops, or I'm not sure what it's called. It's not bad. I don't know. The night race in September. Yeah, fair enough. I hope that increases, and I hope when we come back around the calendar for a concrete in spring that we can get some more people into the stands, because I think that was still the most depressing part for me, is to come back after the years of dirt and we left the concrete because of attendance, coming back to the concrete and still seeing just the sparsity in the stands
Yeah.
was not very fun for me. And I think the racing product deserved much better than that.
Yeah, but to that point, though, I think we do have to remember, this place fits what, 150, 160,000?
It's ginormous. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, again, maybe we'll get there again one day. I don't know. But I think we're not in the mid 2000s anymore.
I know.
Trying to rebound from. I thought it was better. Let me put it this way: I thought it was better than like 2018, 2019. Certainly the All-Star race in 2020, but that was pandemic restrictions. They fit, I think, up to 30,000 in there. But again, the place is massive, so they were all spread out. But I think it still looked better than that. It looked like a nice, decent amount of people showed up, especially given there were some concerns about the weather earlier in the week. I thought, for the first race back, it was a decent sized crowd, and hopefully they were entertained by what they saw. I mean, again, I think most of the time a race is more entertaining in person than it is on TV, but this again, I think was absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of fans are walking away from it fired up and absolutely thrilled with what we saw. So we'll see if it changes. Yeah, the attendance of a night race or when we come back in the spring next year.
It's especially entertaining at Bristol. If you get a chance, please go. And I think the fans that went there, they got a lot better race than I think that they were ever expecting that they would get.
Yeah, or than they would have gotten on the dirt.
Yes,
that was the other thing. I don't know how many people
would have been ho hum.
Yeah, I mean we'll get into that here in just a moment, but yeah, I think this was much better than what we've seen the last 3 years. I like that we did the dirt experiment. I think it was fine. But we know we knew what to expect at this point. Going back to the concrete, I think that was one of the best races we've seen in years. Well, let's catch up on the chat here before we move on. Good to see our own Joe Samniego in the chat. Good evening, Joe, and saying he's agreeing with, I think this was in reference to applauding NASCAR for not throwing the cautions out. My first concern when Denny and Kyle blew tires was a race with cautions every 40 laps. 100% NASCAR letting them race was the way to go. And then we said it felt like old school. Here's a throwback for you. Days of Thunder line. Tires win races, Cole. Take care of the tires, no doubt. And that's exactly what Denny Hamlin did on his way to victory yesterday.